Good morning, this is Diana Sescolini, and today we're going to talk about Chapter 7. We're going to be talking about accounting ACCTGFS465, which is financial accounting for non-business majors. So we're going to be talking about Chapter 7, which is called working capital. Let me park myself up here in the corner. So we're going to be talking today about working capital management. Let me get my little laser pointer. So the key word here is management. So, and capital. I'm going to talk about things that are going to help you understand how to manage capital. Working capital is capital that actually helps you with your business. So let's just jump right in here. This will be a much easier chapter than Chapter 6 was. So working capital is basically your current assets and your current liabilities. Things you own and things you owe. Current meaning less than 1 year. So working capital means that these are the things I'm going to use to help build my business. Okay. Sometimes current assets are called gross working capital, but honestly, people only use the word working capital. Okay. Net working capital is the difference between total current assets, which are things I own, and total current liabilities, which are things I owe. So kind of like your net worth, but only looking at the current perspective. So let's get started. I will be breaking this video down into small, short sections for you to watch so you don't get bored with it. There are a few formulas in here, but a few ratios, but not anywhere like Chapter 6. Okay, so let's start talking about working capital management. Two favorite words of mine, which I've talked about many times, is effectiveness and efficiency. How can I take my working capital and manage it effectively to provide the maximum return on my assets and the minimal payments for my liabilities, things I owe? So the first thing we're going to actually look at is our assets. And we're going to look at something called current asset management. And so we're looking here. These are my current assets. Cash is always number one. Marketable securities is when you have excess money and you invest it in short term. And we'll have a slide for each of these. Accounts receivable is when your customers owe you money. And inventory are things you buy to resell. So the whole goal is here is how do I manage these four current assets to maximize my return on my investment and to minimize any of my liabilities. So we're going to have a slide for each one of these. So let's talk about cash management first, okay? When I talk about cash management, the key is you always want to have the biggest amount of cash available to you. When I talk about cash, it could consist of any of these four things. It could be petty cash, and I don't know if we've had a spot on that yet, but petty cash is small amounts of money kept around the office to pay things that happen that you don't want to write a check for. Any cash on hand, any cash in the bank, whether it's checking or savings. So the whole goal is to hold on to your cash as long as possible to make it work for you. Because when my money is actually in the bank and I haven't spent it on anything, I'm actually hopefully earning some interest on it. So when we talk about cash management, there's a couple things. There's this term, and I don't like this term, but it's called float. Okay? Float. Basically, float is floating your money before you actually have to use it. For example, a disbursement float is the time between when I pay somebody, when I actually give you your paycheck, and then you actually go down to the bank and deposit it. So disbursement float is the amount of time between when I actually pay somebody and when that check is actually cashed. So I could pay you today, and if you're one of these people who just put checks in your wallet and leave them there, I could actually be having that cash in my bank until you actually cash your check. So it could actually be to my advantage to keep it in my account. Okay, collections float is the time that goes between when your customers pay you. Okay, when your customers actually pay you, and you pay me, you give me a check, I go down the bank, put it in. Until it's actually cleared your account and all the money's in my bank, that's called a collections float. Obviously, I want that money in there quicker than what your bank may want to give it to me. So floating money is not a great personal practice, but it is certainly a good business practice. So let's talk a little bit more about cash management before I move on. Okay, so the last float we want to talk about is how do I manage collection float? This is when customers owe me money. Many big organizations have a lockbox locally, and when you pay them, even though they may be back east, you send the payment to a lockbox that's local. Credit card companies are notorious for this. So they may have a lockbox in Los Angeles. As soon as that check hits that lockbox, an agent actually opens that box and deposits that check. So it gets the money into the bank quicker. If I had to mail it to Indiana, New York, Pennsylvania from California, it would have a time of, there would be a delay because of the mailing. So another way to manage my cash is to offer EFT, where money is simply paid directly into my account or vice versa. So if I accept debit cards from my customers, as soon as I swipe their debit card, I have the money available to me. Okay, so this is a good way to understand how to manage the cash for a business. Get the money in as quick as possible and take as long as possible before it actually has to be spent. So we'll continue on the next video with marketable securities. We're done for this video.